So today we've got a bit of a three-way going on. I'm going to be having a chat with Kurt Manny of Manny Lofts on YouTube, and also James of Robertson Family Racing Pigeons, also of YouTube fame. James is in America, Kurt is in Australia, while I'm here in good old Blighty. I've actually been really looking forward to this conversation because I wanted to compare my own experiences of being a born-again pigeon fancier with that of my contemporaries, James in the USA and Kurt in Australia.
Okay, so I am James Robertson. I'm originally from Utah, United States. I've moved all over though, and always tried to keep pigeons with me.
Robertson Family Racing Pigeons, James here.
Like through grad school and stuff, didn't work. Had to take a break from that. But yeah, I'm currently in Maryland, and been here for about 7 years and had pigeons that whole time. And by profession, I'm an entomologist. I study insects and run a DNA lab where we study the genomics of insects. My YouTube channel is Robertson Family Racing Pigeons.
I'm Kurt, and I'm from Perth in Western Australia. Like James, I've moved around a fair bit. I'm originally from Tasmania, if you don't know where that is. It's probably one of the most southern points. It's very cold, and I didn't race pigeons there, but that's kind of where I started off. And that's pretty interesting itself because it's got one of the biggest channel crossings and the worst straits in the world. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I moved over here 12 years ago. Sort of just finished my apprenticeship, left the pigeons that I had at home with Dad. And he's probably still there, as most of them, I'd say. And then, yeah, followed the sort of the money, because the money's on this side of the country, because it's one of the biggest mining states in the world. So, and then decided to slow down a bit, and then all of a sudden pigeons come back. So that's kind of where I am, and my channel is mainly pigeons.
With the most subscribers, I think, on YouTube, is that right, for a pigeon channel?
No. There's a lot of Filipino ones there and stuff, but probably like English-wise, probably, yeah. But subscribers don't mean much.
Yeah, cut that part out about subscribers don't mean much.
No, the numbers. It's the don't focus. Yeah, don't
you
focus on the
subscribers. I don't care about you subscribers. That's
I do.
No, but Kurt, seriously, you are like almost like 400,000. I mean, that blows everyone else out of the water. No one's even an order of magnitude close.
There's Filipino ones.
You've really done an amazing job of capturing a worldwide audience. And that's one of your specialties, I think, that I've seen. Is just, man, Kurt really knows, Kurt, I always want to call you Manny. Kurt really has learned how to reach this global audience in a really effective way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a couple of I put YouTube channels in just to see where you rank, and it makes the y-axis massive because there's Kurt's all up there and then everybody else down here, with like fiber optic cables running at the bottom.
There's still a few more. There's still a few more that are quite a fair bit higher, but not so much in the English space, I don't think so.
Take the compliment, Kurt.
No, I am. Yeah, I appreciate it. But yeah.
So just a couple of other fact ones. So we'll get through these, and then we can have a more chilled out, relaxed conversation. So James, your loft, how big is it, and how many?
My loft is 10 feet by 15 feet, not including that external aviary. The aviary is what, 8 feet by 8 feet? And so it's a small scale. Yeah.
How many sections have you got in there?
We've got 3 sections. You open the door, you got a corridor, and then you got 2 sections to the left. Both are about 4 feet by 7 feet. And then the corridor ends right into the breeder section, which is 6 feet by 10 feet.
Kurt, I've seen yours. What's the size of your loft?
So the main one's 4.8 meters long.
Oh, here we go. What? How do we?
Yeah. So you're gonna have to convert that because I'm on the metric scale, but and I think it's like 3.6 wide by about 2 meters high. So
yeah, so about, was it like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 feet, something like that, 14, 15 feet?
Yeah, long. I'm not really good with the conversions, but yeah. And then I've got the breeding one, which is like 2.4 by 2.4, I'd say.
2.4. That's 8 foot. I know that's a construction.
Yeah. So yeah. And then I've got another one around the corner, which no one sees, which is like a small one. It's kind of just like a spot where they can get out of the camera for a little bit and just sort of, just give them a break, not being harassed all the time.
So we do all right. Actually, between the three of us, we've got quite small setups compared to a lot of the guys that, that I say professional rate, if that's a term. It's like on your back garden kind of racing that we're doing, or pigeon fancying.
Yeah, I don't want too many pigeons anyway. It's a lot of work.
How many do you have, Kurt, including young birds?
I'm going down through a reduction at the moment, so I don't really know how many I've got. I think there's like 40, probably 50 in the main loft, which is not many because I'm getting a bit of a hard time at the moment. But and there's probably like 20 or 30 breeders, but I'm cutting right down because I've only got 4 cockbirds that are really good, and the rest are okay.
But you've had to have those numbers to find those 4, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because I've had a lot of people send me pigeons, and so I had like 30 or 40 pigeons in 1 year that I had to sort through. So it's,
how about you, James? How many birds have you got, James?
It's actually very close to what Kurt said. I've got about, I guess in total probably about 70.
So a majority of those young birds now.
The majority, no, actually, because I try to ship off most of those young birds. I'm not flying young birds this year, club racing. They're all going out to races or to other people's lofts. And so, I have kind of this a fluid intake and outtake, so I get a batch of youngsters ready to go, and then they're off to races or to other people's lofts. And so my numbers are kind of going up and down and up and down. But I think it's kind of the average is right around 60, 70.
It's a similar number to mine. I think I've got 17 cocks or 18 cocks and 17 hens. They're yearlings and 2-year-olds, and then the rest are made up of young birds. And how many of them I've got, I don't know. I can see one's come back from this morning. She's
I see it up there.
They've suddenly found their wings, and they've taken off today and yesterday. So I'll have to do a count up at some point. So you guys both doing a big into one loft races now, it seems, or at least not necessarily focusing on club racing. And are they for the same reason, or is that for different reasons?
For me, it's just an alternate way to race, given my schedule and time commitments. I would love to have the time to club race because, in my opinion, that's kind of the most exhilarating. You put in all this effort training the birds, you get to know the birds, their different personalities, and you really form a bond with each bird. Throughout the season of training them, you learn a ton through trying to get them into shape, and what each one is capable of. And man, it's just the coolest thing to see them come home and they surprise you. They're always surprising you, and it's just exhilarating. And so for me, club racing is the most fun and exciting, but I'm thankful that there's an alternative out there. One loft racing at least allows me to enjoy the breeding aspect of it. As a scientist, I really like kind of that side of things, kind of the genetics side of things, and putting pairs together and seeing how their offspring do. And that's really fun too. But you gotta wait till the fall to see the results. And again, most races do have like kind of a live feed going of the final races. You can kind of see the drops come in, and you can watch on Benzing Live and on Wind Companion which birds come in, but there's always kind of this lag time. You really don't know. It's fun in its own way. If I had a little more money, I would, and I hope to do this in the future, I would fly out and be there at the finals. I think that'd be really fun. I'd also have to have a bird that's doing well in that race to justify such a trip.
Yeah.
So you how many have you sent to? I saw like I said, just quickly saw that you uploaded a video recently, and you had your spreadsheet out of all the different races.
Yeah.
And so, are they all one-off races, or they are all one-off races?
Those are all one-off races. I am sending to one band race, but that's just like 3 birds, and that's local. Someone wanted me to send them some birds, and I thought that was a fun opportunity to kind of test my birds in this climate, kind of the Northeast United States. Most of the one lofts I'm participating in are in Texas, so kind of the central south, and then one in Florida, southeast, and then some in California, the west. So it's kind of giving me an opportunity to test my bloodlines in a different region of the continent.
So, so they're all pretty hot states, right?
Yeah.
You're in a not so hot state. Is that right? Does that matter? I mean, so if we have a really hot day, I know my birds aren't going to perform generally as well. So do you have to think about that, and do you account for that? So with your breeding, if you were club racing, say local to Maryland, right? So what's the average temperature that you're racing at compared to Texas, California, Florida? The humidity is going to be quite high. The bird's going to be require a different kind of bird, isn't it, for something like that?
Yeah, I think in a sense it does. But 2 things here. One is Maryland actually does get really hot and humid, and man, it's just about to start setting in, the humidity, and I'm just dreading that. But it does get close to 100 in the summertime, always up in the 90s, and super high humidity. So it's not quite what you're going to get in Texas. They'll be 10 degrees hotter, and maybe it's a little bit more humid. Florida definitely a little more humid, but it's still pretty hot and humid. But yeah, you do kind of have to take that into consideration when you're sending birds out to races. I mean, you want to send like these big bulky birds to these hot, humid environments. I don't know, maybe a little more buoyant, lightweight bird might do better. I don't know. That's something that fanciers have to try and figure out. I do believe, in a sense, though, that's kind of like the horses for courses type of mentality, and I do believe in that in a sense. But I also believe that you can breed an all-around pigeon that can perform in lots of different environments and conditions, and that's kind of what I'm looking for.
And Kurt, you're doing a lot of one-off races. You send it to Pattaya, or are you limited? I think last time we spoke, you said you're limited to where you can send your one-off races because a couple of them closed down, the big ones in Australia.
Yeah, very limited. Probably got the same size country as America, but we've got probably 3 one-lofts, and then we're only this year we're able to get out to Thai Masters. And last couple of years, we've had the option to get to Pattaya as well. So very narrow, very limited. So, last year was my first year, and I only sent about 12 birds out. So 2 to Pattaya, and then I sent 10 to one in Melbourne in Victoria. So same thing. I've got a 4-week-old son, so I don't have much time. So I enjoy the club racing, but the time and effort and trying to get, like, obviously everyone watches my videos, I can't even loft fly my pigeons anymore, so I'm pretty limited to being able to get my birds into that fitness to actually get them past 20 kilometers, because they get thinned out really quickly, what's probably 10 mile for the other guys. But it's very difficult. So one-lofts are good, but expensive.
I mean, that must be really, really difficult when the peregrines. I know that we get hit with peregrines, and I know that the population of them has massively increased in the UK. And it seems to be we're quite densely populated, and there's plenty of food for them all year round generally, I think. But when they have an impact, it's not just the bird that they catch, it's the birds that they scare and scatter and all of those things. So are there peregrines in Pattaya? Are they big? Is there a big falcon population? I imagine they're spread all over the world. So
they would be there, but I think you've got 10,500 pigeons,
And you haven't got to worry, you've not got to see it yourself,
Yeah.
have you?
And you sit there watching the final at home, and you see these white pigeons come in, and you're like, this, like, it's good. It's because I can't even get a coloured pigeon past 20 kilometers most of the time. Like, most of my pigeons that have been disappearing are my white flights, or like all my nice pigeons I like to look at.
James, do you have that issue with falcons when you're racing? Yeah,
absolutely. You hear a lot about that. For us, it's the peregrine falcon, and then Cooper's hawk, kind of those. It's like the sparrowhawk, what you guys have up in the UK. Yeah, it's a real issue. And I think I like what you said, Dan, about it's not just the one successful hunt, but it's kind of the aftermath of that hunt, you know, especially with those young birds, man. They scatter and they could just like fly for 50 miles because they're scared to death, and soon they have no idea where they're at and they're gone.
Yeah, I had that recently, actually. I think I lost 7 in one fly. And the furthest I got one reported was 95 kilometers. So it's probably very similar to that. And like you said, they just don't stop. They just keep going.
Yeah.
95 kilometers. Did you get in the car and pick it up?
Yeah, it was about a 2-hour trip each way, and then probably 4 hours having a pigeon chat. So
did that yesterday.
Yeah, there's no pickups of pigeons.
It is a lot of time, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
I think that's so. For I'm quite lucky because I only work a mile and a half away, and so, for example, last weekend our race was postponed until Monday, which should put most people, especially if you're working, you wouldn't have a chance. You'd have to phone in sick. And so I managed to get back for that. In fact, I spent most of the day here. One loft racing for us it is a lot of money. Yeah. And I unless you've got the experience in and you've got the birds to send in the first place, otherwise you're just going to be, pissing money up against a tree. I guess you don't know how good the bird's going to be unless you've got experience in club racing, or at least you've been around the birds. So for me, it'd be completely pointless. It'd be a real lottery, even more so than it is now. But I do like the fact that it exists, especially for people that want to be involved but can't necessarily engage in it all the time, because it is really time consuming, and the more you get into it, the more you find, I'm just going up the loft, and then have a cup of tea, and then you'll be back at the loft, and it does take an awful lot of time, doesn't it? Especially training, which I've discovered recently, actually, that I think the guys that do the best are the guys that put the most time in. And genetics is one thing. You've really got to put the time in, and even though I can come back from work and get them out if the weather's nice, or take them for a quick toss, I can't do it anywhere near as much as what the retired guys can do. They've got budget, they don't have a mortgage, the kids are all grown up, and they've got time there, which is brilliant. I think it's something like that you can aspire to. It's like, who gets better in any sport that they do the older they get. You've got 60, 70, 80-year-old guys that are at the top of their game, and somebody comes in at 20 or 30 or 40 and newcomer, you're not going to compete, and I like that. I like the fact you can't it's not just your physical capability. But yeah, I think so. You're talking, James, about your like how you select for a bird, and I think that's one of your recent videos as well, isn't it? What you're looking for.
Yeah.
Do you both look for the same thing?
Off the young bird itself, I mean, I'm looking for a bird with I like a bird with personality, to be honest. One that just kind of stands out, but honestly, they've got to be physically sound. There's got to be a physical specimen that's able to meet the task that's going to be put ahead of them. So they're going to be flying 350 miles. And honestly, when we're talking about one loft races, that's where it's at. Who cares about how they do at the 100-mile race and the 150-mile race? It's all about the final. And so that's what you got to think about. What bird is going to do well at this 350, 400-mile mark? And so you want one that's, physically in good shape. I like to look for good balance. You guys always see me doing the balance test, and one that has kind of that longer keel. A longer keel is more area for muscle attachment, breast muscle attachment. That's going to power their flight. A bird that is buoyant, a bird that has, you know, a little bit of spunk and fight to it. Those are some of the traits I look for. Nice, strong wing, kind of a short, humorous. Those are some of the physical traits that I look for. But I will say that, you know, I have a pair that they don't always produce these physical specimens. They're not ever going to win in a conformation show. You know, these birds aren't going to win, but they still produce good flyers. So there are exceptions, and you have to be aware of that. And the only way you can become aware of that is by testing them out, flying them, let other people fly them.
So you've done well in a race the last year, is that right, Kurt? What were you looking for with the one you sent?
Yeah, so I've only had like the 1 year, which was probably a little bit of luck, but from now on, it's more, I'm just selecting pigeons that I just can't lose. Because like two things, like for local racing, it's really good for me because I can't loft fly. I can manage to get the young birds kidding together, but they have to go on the road pretty quickly because they just can't loft fly. They just get absolutely slaughtered. So I can't have pigeons that panic and then just disappear. Like I was saying before, I've got 4 cocks that can do that. Yeah, it's really hard to, a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I just can't loft fly. So unfortunately, I'm pushed into this position where it's like, I just have to have these pigeons. They might be a little bit slower. They're more distance types pigeons, but they don't really need that loft flying as much. So like, I don't really have much of a selection. They just need to come home. I can't lose them because like the second part is if I'm going to spend money and put them to one loft race, I need to make the final. So I think my ones in Australia, I sent the 10, and they're a bit of a mixed bunch. I think I got out of those 10, we had 8 to start the race with, and we got 4 to the final and 2 home on the final. And then I sent 2 to Batea, and I got both of them to the final, and then 1 home on the final. Yeah, the results are okay.
If you're getting 50% of your team home on the final race of Batea, that's impressive in my book. You know, that's a tough race. And
yeah,
I think that speaks a lot to your pigeons and the ones you selected.
I want more than 50% though. That's my goal. I want 100%. That's what I don't need to win, but my goal is to send 2 pigeons to a race and get them all the way through. I don't think, Batea is a bit different. I think it's challenging for everyone because, like historically, if you go through every single race, they're around about 1,600 average. Like that is the speed. So they're pretty fast races. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the humidity's high, and it's always like 30, 35 degrees Celsius. So it's hot, fast racing. And I think that's where mine struggle a little bit because we race in the winter, so it's a bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's still hot in your winter though, right? I mean, your winter is our summer.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, yeah, this year's been really hard because we only just had rain, and that's been 7 months without rain. So it's been really hot for the birds. So they haven't done much.
So I've been told a few things when people I mean, it's not necessarily choosing for a one-loft race, but I guess the principle is similar. You're looking for a bird that's fast and comes home. And it seems to be the same thing. They want them light, buoyant, but they talk about lots of feathers. Like I'm not sure how, whether that's a sign of something else. Lots of feathers on the body, so they go from the back. And there was one that I handled yesterday, actually, one of my slowest birds, but he had lots of feathers. So I don't know if there's anything, in there, whether there's any hope. But that does seem to be not too big, and it's difficult for a newcomer. Like when I first started looking at going the loft, and I couldn't, if they were all blue bars, I have not a clue which one's male, which one's female, how old they are, anything. It was really difficult. And when I'd go and see somebody, I'd go to another fancier's loft and see them on their race day before my birds were racing, and they could tell me which bird was which as they came in. And so there's a hen, that's a cock, that's the one from this race, and that one. And I was like, how can you see that? Your eyes are failing, but you can see, you can see that kind of stuff. And so once you get into it a little bit more and you start handling them a little bit more, I guess you start to notice the difference between the birds, and then maybe you perhaps spot a particular bird with certain characteristics, and then you'll look out for how that performs in particular, because it's stuck in your mind. Like I know, James, you keep a record, and I've got a spreadsheet of mine, and I rank them as a loft ranking, and then in a club ranking, and then in a federation ranking, and none of them come anywhere really in the Fed, but within my loft I can see which ones perform the best, and then I tend to gravitate towards them anyway, and the rest just don't really get a look in, and perhaps that's a bad thing really. I should try and adapt a little bit more and bring them on a little bit. But what I'm getting at is I'm now, in my 3rd year, I'm starting to notice characteristics that I think are perhaps good. I'm yet to prove that, because I'm only just racing 2-year-olds, and I think you've got to give them a few years to find the best of them. Like dominance, for example, the birds that want that top perch and don't let any other birds near it. When I put the grip bowl down, there'll be a particular bird that he's on the top perch, but he's also guarding that grip bowl. And when I looked into it recently, actually, I thought, well, who is his mum and dad? And I looked in the sire and the dam, and it was my 2 best performing birds. Which my 2 best performing birds aren't anything special, but for me, they're my best performers. And then he's the most dominant young bird. I thought, oh, maybe there is something in this personality and this, selecting, and I'm hoping that it is. And I'm hoping that I keep him. I'm hoping he's not one of the ones that disappeared this morning. But he feels like he stands in a particular way. And I've got a few that are just a little bit more, dominant and physical. And then last year, the young bird, the one that didn't return from the race last week, was the one that won Archie, my son. It came 3rd in the gold ring race. And it's the little bird, little hen. She'll stand on my head, and she'll come and take food out of my hands and whatever. But she came 3rd in the gold ring race, but she was the only one out of 25 birds or 23 birds I sent that didn't come back. So it's hard to. I went and picked her up, to drive and go and collect her, mainly because it was my fault. I did mention that to Kurt earlier, that actually I didn't train her enough this year. She got liberated and probably just this time. But it's probably quite hard, isn't it, if you're a newcomer, to select for a one-off race. So you've almost got to do your apprenticeship in club racing. Would you agree? Or do you think
I do agree. I think that's one of the fastest way to get to the point where you're successful and you have a more informed decision when it comes time to make those choices for which birds am I going to send to one-lot races.
Have you just muted yourself there, James?
Yeah, I muted myself because I got a kid at the door.
All right. I think my wife's just hung out all the washing on the line. She realizes that.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it.
I'm trying to sit like this so you can't see my underwear swinging on the line.
Just like that. That's awesome. No, so one of my good friends who is extremely successful in one loft racing, he sends his birds out locally to local flyers, and it helps them. It gives them birds to fly, but also it's information, it's data.
Yeah.
And then he knows, oh, my birds are flying well in these areas. And man, if you can do that, I think that's great. In my mind, it's a lot about finding which pairs produce as fast as possible. And then okay, those are the ones I got to focus on. Like Kurt, you said, yeah, I've got 4 cocks, that are my good cocks, and the rest are just, they're still good, but you got 4 that are the good ones. And to get to that point as quickly as possible is the most important thing. And so there are lots of ways of doing that. You can get your birds out to other people's lofts and help them and test them out in different areas. You can, and then it's kind of a low investment scenario in terms of testing your birds. Club racing, if you have time to do it, that's a great way to do it. But again, if you don't, partner up. And I think that honestly, for me, is one of the keys of the sport, is to partner with people. You talked, Dan, about these retired people who have a lot of time now, and they can they can give it their all, but a lot of people can't. They still have young families. Some of them are going to school. And in those cases, I think it could still work, but you got to partner with someone. Maybe you're the breeding side and they're the flying side. I've partnered with people who have reached out to me who say, you know what, I can't have pigeons because we have this homeowner association. They don't allow pets in our neighborhood. But man, I'd love to fly some of your birds in a one loft race. And for me, that's perfect because I get to test the birds, the bloodlines, and I don't have to pay for it. And so it's like a win-win partnership. They get to participate, they get to see birds fly under their name, and I get from it in return.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I don't know what the scene's like in Maryland. What's the sort of, I know when me and Kurt spoke about it before, the pigeon fancy generally in the UK and Australia is on a downward sort of trajectory. Is it the same or in Maryland, or is it stabilized? Is you seeing it's growing? How many people in like your area or in your actually race?
Well, I think that, you know, as far as club racing goes, you know, historically, I mean, we're right around Washington, D.C. So that's kind of a strong area. And there's been several clubs and a few that are still going pretty strong. But I mean, I think the typical trend is we are seeing kind of a drop off in numbers. I think that's kind of across the board, though, in club racing. You know, I think this has been a conversation that a lot of people have had about, you know, how do we inspire the next generation so that the sport doesn't die and stuff. I don't know if the sport's going to die. I don't think that necessarily. But yeah, I think we have seen a little bit of a drop in numbers over the last several decades, at least. That said, there are still clubs. There are still viable clubs here that are strong and you know, have enough members to have a great, you know, camaraderie and competition. So that's nice. I live in an area. I'm blessed to live in an area where that is available. I just don't have the time. It is a little bit far away. Like the club is like an hour drive away. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. It's like, oh man, that's just like another couple hours of my precious time that it's hard to justify, you know, but the opportunity is at least there.
What's the proximity? Kurt, how many have you got and how far is your club? I'm interested to know that.
I think there's about 115 flyers in our federation, which is pretty much just like our whole state, basically. But I've got a club that's probably 10 minutes away, but I go to another one which is about half an hour away. So not too bad.
And how many members are in your club that you
I think we've got 6 or 7 this year, so not many. We've had a couple pass away, and yeah, it's just hard to get new members.
I think that's going on everywhere, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty lucky with that. I'm a member of 2 clubs that are both next door to each other outside the pub. So they've got the old stables, and they've just. We've got the North Road on one side and then the South Road on the other side. I'm a member of both, but I only race with the North. I joined it actually. I joined the South first, but then the government introduced some legislation and it made it difficult to race across to get the distance into Europe. So I joined the North Road, and actually it turned out to be really good. And I've got to try and aim for that little. There we go. This is like what weather girls do, isn't it? Or weather men. There. That's where I'm aiming for. But there's all that seats across. That's what I'm aiming for at a certain point. But it's the same thing. Is like both clubs have 8 or 9 active flyers, and the average age, I think I'm the youngest by a few decades, it's going one way. But interesting what you're saying there, James, about how to get the fastest way to get those birds. And I think one of the ways that's really apparent here in the UK is there's loads of fanciers out there that don't necessarily race all the time and that are starting to give up the sport, ill health, age, and they put their birds and lofts up for sale. And so for the savvy newcomer, there's the opportunity, because you've got somebody that's especially if they're decent, they've been flying for decades, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they've been selecting their birds. It's like a off the shelf, especially if they're decent, and they're still, because they'll probably still have their best birds anyway. When they start to thin out, because it's getting a little bit difficult for them to clean the loft, they'll thin out the rubbish, they'll keep the best. And then when they finally do those sales, that's where to go, because you can buy those breeding pairs potentially, depending on how old they are. I know some struggle to to breed, don't they? Once they've reached a certain age and they change their lofts. But I feel like now is a great time to get into to pigeon racing, at least in the UK. Because there's so many lofts, there's so many fanciers that are giving up, and you can get. There's a guy actually I was talking to recently down the road there, and he's, in fact, everybody I'm talking to, they're buying secondhand lofts that are only 5 years old, and they're getting everything: the feeders, the drinkers, the birds, everything, young birds as well that have been bred, and they get it for next to nothing. Like you're buying a team, an established sports team almost. Put it up on, you got to hire a van, fit it on your garden, and you're away. And I think that's a real opportunity for people. I don't know if that's available to you guys where you are, whether that opportunity comes up much, or
I would guess not nearly as often as it happens in the UK. But that's actually a really great observation, Dan. That's true. That's a great opportunity for new flyers to be able to get a foot in and a kind of a step ahead, so to speak, in a sport that does have a steep learning curve, or maybe I should say a steep investment curve, getting the birds, getting all the supplies. I mean, it really adds up. And then to be able to have birds bloodline that's already been tested in your area, that's fantastic. That's a win for sure.
What about you, Kurt? Is there many of those opportunities where you are?
Yeah, not as many, because we're in such a big country and the sport is very small, so we're kind of spread out all over the place. But yeah, it's pretty tight knit. So if someone outside the country selling birds, people can buy them. Someone might be 4,000 kilometers away and we'll still get them. Probably not like you guys. Such a high density of flyers compared to us. I just try to ignore all these sales and stuff now, because you will always be looking for a better pigeon. That's the biggest problem. I got caught up in that. If you've watched my videos, I go through a lot of pigeons, and you can get it's really hard to say no to a pigeon, and that's the worst thing. You're always looking for a better pigeon, and unfortunately there's not many good pigeons out there.
Probably should appreciate it a little bit more, because where I live, it's a mining town, and pretty much all the area, all the counties around here, they're all mining towns, ex-mining towns. And Charlie, a mate of mine who I met through fancy, is in his mid-80s now, and he was saying that there used to be 30, 40 lofts in the village up there, and it's you think, wow, can you imagine? But even though you say, well, there's lots of opportunity. Sounds like there's lots of opportunity where I am. And then, but then the people that I'm talking to are saying, "Oh no, it's dying. There's hardly any lofts around. We've only got 5 or 6 on this street when there used to be this many." And you think, well, actually, by comparison to a lot of places, that's still quite healthy, I guess, in certain, or be considered healthy. But one thing I wanted to ask Kurt, because I didn't get a chance to watch it, was this brainwashing technique that you've been doing. It's probably something I should be looking into, not necessarily for the same reasons, but I get on my races, I can tell where my birds have been. They've been to everybody else's loft but mine. And so I'll get a favorable wind and I'll be looking this way, and I think, right, this is where they're coming from. And then inevitably they fly from behind me, where all the drag is. Generally that's the way they go. And I wonder if I've made a bit of a mess in the early years, not conditioning my birds to go peel away from the flock, head home, because that's where the party is, and where the buffet is. And I don't know, is that what you're training? Is that what you're brainwashing into yours?
I kind of thought it was probably more of a common thing, but I didn't get a lot of comments about it as well. So I'm like, people, oh, can you make a video about it? Because I'm only picking like a few little bits and pieces out of it. Because for me, I need my birds to get out of the basket quickly as possible, and then come down here to where I am. Because I'm right at the back. We only fly like a north, basically like 3 lines in a north direction, and I'm like one of the last lofts right at the back, and our city stretches like 100 kilometers. So that's why I'm picking these little brainwashing things up. I do need to make a video about it. I don't fully do the whole system, but there was a guy in not far out of Sydney, I think his name was Davo, and he kind of come up with it, and he was unbeatable. Like I think he's recently got out of pigeons, but that was his system. And there is link somewhere I need to get and probably show it to you so you understand it, because I won't explain it fully.
Can you not give a brief sort of?
Yeah, so the basic concept is that you want your birds to come out of the basket, come home as quickly as possible, but they have to be able to break from the other birds. And when they come home, they need to just trap straight away, which in the last few videos, I've started to see those results. Because did you see the video where I dragged someone else's whole race team back here?
I saw that.
I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, because I'm a long way away from people. It's very dangerous for pigeons to come out this way, because I've never, normally if there's a pigeon out, the falcons are onto it. So there's definitely some merit in it. I need to get a better understanding of it, because I've only just started to use it. I used it a little bit last time. So basically for me, I've been doing like the 3 kilometer tosses, the 7, and then I'm at 20 now, but I just do as many as I can in those shorter ones. Yeah, you're keeping them really, like, they've got to be hungry. They're on like 50% barley, I think, at the moment. But they're still getting fed well, but they just need to come home and trap really quickly. I do need to sit down and make a better video about it. But if the problem I have is the birds follow other people's pigeons, I'm already on the other side of 50% of the flyers on the list. If I can get them to break and come home, then I'm going to be in that top 50%. But they need to trap quickly as well. Because even if you watch some, I don't know if you've seen them, but some of my videos last year, there's pigeons come back and the falcons are onto them. Like, how can you win a race if the pigeons come, you see them come over the top of the trees and then they hide in the trees? So I'm just trying to figure out all these little bits of information. Like, even I took some from Frank McLaughlin as well, where I thought, oh, he doesn't loft fly his pigeons. Well, I'm not going to bother, because that's where I lose most of my pigeons. Because last year, I think by the time I got to 20 kilometers, I'd lost 55% of my pigeons. This year, I've lost about 25%. And that is not loft flying and then doing some of that stuff off Frank McLaughlin, and also some of that brainwashing technique, which I got off another Frank, which has provided me some birds last year to race as well, which where my recessive thread come from. I don't know if I explained that very well, but
I'd like to see a video of it for sure. I think it'd be interesting if you did that. I'd certainly be watching that one, because I think it's something that a lot of people work out but don't necessarily tell. How to make sure that their birds don't follow other birds and that they come straight home. And you know, mine don't. And when they do get home, they sort of take a bit of time, do a few victory laps, what they think of victory laps, before they decide to come down. I mean, the 2-year-olds this year have done a lot better. It's the yearlings that seem to struggle the most, trapping straight away. The 2-year-olds sort of come in nicely, but maybe that's part of it as well, I guess. So
I was just going to make a comment. Kurt, that brings up a really important difference between one loft racing and club racing. With club racing, you've got to have birds that can break from the flock. They've got to learn how to do it. And with one loft racing, they don't ever have to learn how to do that. They're all going to the same place. And so, you know, it takes an extra element of intelligence, I think, in club racing with those birds having to break. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I disagree with a lot of people when they say that one loft's like the future. I think one loft is just another discipline, and being another discipline like speed or distance, it needs a special pigeon for that. And it's exactly what you're saying, and I agree with it. I only raced my first one lofts last year, and I've seen the huge difference between my best performing local racing pigeons and pigeons that I selected for one lofts. And my local racing ones do well here, but then when they're in the one lofts, they'll one of the first birds disappear. And then these other birds done really well. Like, I had 2 in the top 10 in the final, and I couldn't even get them ones home here. Like, we could have a whole another 2-hour conversation about one loft pigeons, because I don't think there is enough talk about it. Like, I would scour through YouTube trying to find something to watch on one loft pigeons, but there's just not much there. And I find that funny too, because a lot of people think, yep, they live in a good position, they win a lot of races, and they think, yep, this is the perfect pigeon, I'm going to send this to one loft, I'm going to win. And then they put it in there, and it's like, doesn't do anything. And then they blame the one loft operators. You've got to have a special pigeon, like you're saying. it has to be a special pigeon for one loft racing.
Out and out speed, I guess, there, isn't it? And if it doesn't have to have that, ability to break. Do you think that's a genetic thing, or do you think that's something learned to break?
Up until last year, like I'm probably the same as James, and I like data. I track everything, and I watched some of my birds last year, especially in the Australian ones, and there was just like a certain line of pigeons, and they're always in the top 10%, even in training tosses. And that was this one here. That was my second place in the final, but she was always in the top 10, like 10%. Sorry, she's always there. So there is birds that genetically just, whether they're smarter or they just want to be at the front, but there is a special pigeon. You just got to come through the data, I think.
So there's actually a scientific study that was published, and I can't remember. I mean, it's probably 10 years ago. So this is another thing that, I'm putting on my science nerd glasses on here. And sometimes I'll look into what research has been done with pigeons. And they actually looked at, they tracked the flight of, and the relative position of every bird in a flock as is just loft line. And they found that some birds, some individuals are leaders and others are not, which I thought was fascinating. Those birds even manifest themselves, in a loft fly.
I think I've seen, is that I don't know if I certainly haven't seen that paper, but I've seen the GPS rings where they track them. I'm assuming they use something like that. And I think one guy, there's an old video on YouTube, it's really good actually, and he put all the data in R and then put that onto Google Maps, and you could see them flying around. And I don't know how
it looks like you're watching it in real time.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's cool.
At some point that will become available, right? In tech, when tech comes to that level, that is when pigeon racing will take off, I think.
That is exactly my thought too. As soon as you can watch your birds in real time on your phone, that's when you're going to get the next generation.
I mean, even if it's not real time, even if it's displayed in real time, but there's like a 10-minute lag or half an hour lag, right? Because the time to. So I've actually been speaking to a guy. One of the products that we made for my company is all electronic, and the guy that designed it, the electronics for us, emailed me about a year ago and said, "Is there any other do you have any other projects that you're working on?" And I said, "No, not for work, but I have got this hobby that I've taken up, and I thought it'd be really good if we could make these things and basically trackers that are live, real time." And he said the battery technology at the moment isn't in that. I gave him the dimensions and said the battery technology is not there. And then he messaged me again a few months ago and said, "Are you still looking in? You're still interested in that?" And I said, "Well, if the battery technology is not there, then no." And he said, "Well, there's a couple of options now," and so it is getting closer to it.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of trade-offs, but I think when it does, I think it'd be. And the reason I say this is because my kids love. Well, we all did computer games, right? But they love the stats, so they'll trade football cards and Pokemon cards because they've got stats on on whatever it is, and some fictional character. If you could do the same with pigeons, and you collect that because all the data's recorded, so you'd know, I don't know, this one's 96 for speed and this one's 85 for homing, because it's, I think that kind of thing would be interesting, and get kids involved. But then if they could watch it on their screen and say, well, these are my birds or my dad's birds or whatever, and then race starts at 9 and they can see where they are, maybe you'll be ahead, and then after half an hour you start veering off the wrong way, and you'd be, I think the excitement there would be, it'd be great, wouldn't it? If
cool idea. Yeah.
If somebody could do that. What's the racing pigeon sport? How is it perceived by people locally and in your country? Do you think, what's the Joe Public's perception of racing pigeons?
I think a lot of people don't know about it. I think the vast majority of people don't know about it. I try to wear shirts that have pigeons on them. I have one that says pigeon racing, and I'm walking in the airport and then past someone, and then I hear him turn around and say, "Is that a thing?" I turn around and said, "Yes, it is. Look it up." But most people don't know about it. And you guys have probably experienced this, where you're out training your birds and you're getting your crates out and people are like, "What in the heck is that person doing?" 50 years ago, I think people knew more about it and were more familiar with it. But I think a lot of people are not as familiar that, hey, this actually is a sport. People do this. And actually, a lot of people do this. It's just not as common as football and basketball. But whenever I explain it to them, man, they think it's fascinating. It'd be cool to get the word out more broadly that, hey, this is still a living sport that a lot of people do. And it's really exciting for, these reasons. And, I think that'd be a good thing, whether it brings people into the sport or not. It will at least increase awareness and appreciation for it.
And are you ever embarrassed to say that you race pigeons? Is it something that you say
no.
pleasure? No.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Kurt?
I own that thing.
Yeah, it's probably the same, James. Actually, like most people have no idea. How do they come home, and how do you train them, and how do you get them to come home? And you get all those kind of questions, and they're just like, well, I don't know. They just do it. They just come home. You don't have to train them. Like even this week at work, I think someone must have stumbled across my channel because I don't tell people. Keep it very separate, and then all of a sudden everyone knows, and then everyone's like, they're probably watching this now. Actually, how do you do that? And how do you do this? And then I'm like, yeah, well, I don't. Won a few races this year, won all this money, like especially with the one Loft stuff, and you tell them, they're like, whoa, is that much money in pigeons? I said, yeah, like Pattaya, there's like 2 million US there spread across 926 prizes. Like there's heaps of money in it. And that's only one of many. And people were just shocked. Like that it's such a big thing. Quite interested in the Pattaya one. Like, so how do they fly back from Pattaya to here, Thailand? I'm like, well, they don't. They train them there. Like you're getting all these type of questions where for us it's
yeah.
I don't know if you guys have that sort of issue. I don't know if the class system was massive or whether that, because there's still remnants of that here for sure. And it was always considered low down, just below whippets and greyhound racing. That's where you had pigeon racing. But it seems like people just aren't aware of it where you are. What have you got in the pipeline then, James? Is there anything in particular you're aiming for with your channel? Is there a set goal?
Yeah, so I actually have. I mean, I do like my regular updates that come out. I publish once a week or bi-weekly, but there are longer term projects and videos that I've been working on for a long time, and these ones take a little more care. So there was one of my early on ones that was 10 incredible things about pigeons or racing pigeons. That took some time. That took some homework and some thought. And I had to think carefully about what I want to say and what 10 things I want to highlight. There's another video on kind of scientific merit behind eye sign, where I try and delve in deep into a certain topic. And a lot of those tend to be data driven or kind of based in science. I've got multiple videos on a few topics that that would fall into that category. One is about how smart are pigeons, and the other one is about the scientific basis in homing ability. And they're close, but those ones have taken a long time. So I do like to do the regular updates, give the tips to help new fanciers out. And, I just enjoy it. I like connecting with people. That's actually one of the things that I've liked most about doing this YouTube channel.
Yeah, I like the awareness thing. I think that we need to go back to what resonates with people. And my channel's always been about just showing people how enjoyable they are, just keep as pets. Like I've always had a couple of pigeons kicking around, and like I said, they're all full of character, and there's just that misconception there. So I definitely want to go back to more of that storytelling type of daily videos. Like I enjoy that. You go out there, play with the pigeons, and you've got a naughty one over here that's causing trouble, and you're trying to navigate like all these landmines and falcons, and I'd like to get some colors back because I enjoy breeding the colors, and probably win Pattaya in there too. They'll throw that one in there. But just it would be nice to win Pattaya. It's a long shot, but to show that some hack in the random paddocks of Australia out back somewhere with these field peckers can compete with the likes of Koopman and those guys, like that would be entertaining. But if not, I'm still happy to continue showing that the personal side, the characters, and I think that's what resonates with a lot of people, like a lot like what my audience like. They get attached to certain pigeons, and I think like I enjoy the local racing thing, but it does consume a lot of your channel. You both know, like it's a full-time job. So I'd kind of like to step back a bit and still local race, but now that I've sorted my birds out, like we've been talking about, that I can actually go back and say, look, I've got some good birds here now. I can have some other birds I can play around with, and I feel like that's what kind of brings people into the sport, because they're like, oh, pigeons are actually pretty cool pets. I might just get one, and there's no such thing as getting one pigeon. That's what I said to my wife. I said, I just want one pigeon. Next minute, there's 100 out there.
Right, guys, I'm going to have to go and get my birds ready for night. So I've got all the fun to come yet this weekend if the race doesn't get cancelled. But thanks for coming on the call.
Yeah,
I'll do what I can to get this video out there. And then if you want to send me your logos, PNGs or JPEGs and whatever, I'll stick them on the front, and I'll put a little bit of info on there. I'll do a voiceover introduction, make it sound professional, or I probably won't. I'll probably just whack it on there organically.
You do your thing. You do a good job. And also, Dan, if pigeons don't work out for you, you may consider that meteorologist. You know, becoming a weatherman. You were good.
I've got green screen. Knocking about somewhere.
It's not a very hard job, I don't think. You just got to be right 50% of the time.
Yeah, they're doing a very bad job lately here. That's for sure.
Right. That's funny. I appreciate the opportunity, Dan. This is great. Great idea.
We'll do it again, guys, when we're free. Now we know how the time works. It finally got it together, didn't we? So brilliant.
Yep.
Right. Cheers then, guys.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Good luck.
Okay.
Ta-ra.